So the Caribbean English, first of all, yeah, let us see what is the Caribbean countries. The Caribbean countries, and it is the world map, you see, that is the Caribbean countries. And in a map, in case of the cricket, we know that there is a West Indies cricket team, is it? But in actual page, we don't see a country named West Indies. So what is the West Indies countries? So the West Indies is the cricket uh, team that is consisted of several these states, that is the Caribbean island states. So we will be discussing today about the origin of Caribbean uh, English language. So Caribbean is consist of the islands which are in the Caribbean Sea. And in one side, Caribbean Sea, and another side, the North Atlantic Ocean. And in this area, several minors or the small territories, islands. And these islands all together is called Caribbean countries. Why Caribbean countries? It is, these islands are on the Caribbean Sea. So in one portion we see Caribbean Sea, and another portion we see North Atlantic Ocean. And southeast of the Gulf of Mexico and the North American mainlands, and east of the Central America and the north of America. So here you will be astonished to hear that more than 700 islands are there. Islands, islets, reefs, and clays. So in this Caribbean origin, as you see here, Atlantic Ocean, United States, South America, like Brazil over there. So here, the countries, as you see, that is the small in size, but their number is nearly not more than 700 islands. And they form the West Indies with the nearby Lucanian archipelago, and the Bahamas, and the Turks, and the Caicos Islands, and which are sometimes considered to be a part of the Caribbean despite not bordering the Caribbean Sea. So other parts also included in the Caribbean islands. On the mainland, Belize, Nicaragua, and the Caribbean region of the Colombia, Cozumel, and these are the names, Guyana, Suriname, French Guyana, Guyana region, and Venezuela are often included due to their political and the cultural ties with the region. So though some islands are not occupied in this area, the specific locations, however, for the similarity of their political and the cultural ties, so they are also called the Caribbean countries. So geographically, the islands of the Caribbean or the West Indies are often regarded as the sub-region of the North America, though sometimes they are linked with the Middle America and left to the sub-region of their own, and are organized into the 30 territories, including the sovereign states, overseas departments, and dependencies. From December 15, 1954 to December 10, 2010, there was a country known as the Netherlands Antilles, composed of the 5 states, and all of which were Dutch dependents. So the islands, as you see in the Caribbean Sea, they are the dependencies. That means they are the direct role of several voyagers and the settlers. And we know that the voyagers are from Dutch, from Britain, from Netherlands. Okay, Netherlands are also called Dutch. So these 700 islands are under the territory of or the political role of Britain or Netherlands or other sea voyaging countries. From January 3, 1958 to May 31, 1962, there was also a short-lived political union called the West Indies Federation, composed of 10 English-speaking Caribbean territories, all of which were then British dependencies. So we see a noticeable change over here, that is in 1958, that 10 such islands were compiled together or united together, and they compiled them under the British rule. And they say they don't say themselves the British colony. They say themselves as the British overseas territories, and they are 10 in numbers. And the West Indies cricket team continues to represent many of those islands nations. So that is that I have told you earlier. So these are the Caribbean Sea. As you see, many countries. Look here, these islands is under the British rule. These islands under the US. These islands under the French. So these are the territory, and some islands, as you have noticed, that this is the under Dutch territory. So these are the islands of Caribbean Sea. So 26 Caribbean countries. Have you heard of? So these are the Caribbean countries, other the islands. As you see, these are the names suggested, names as you see in the slides. So these are the, look here, Anguilla, British Overseas Territories, Aruba, Netherlands, Guadeloupe, that is France, Navas Islands, United States, and Nueva Esparta, Venezuela. So the country, as you see in these Caribbean islands, they are under several countries' political role, dominance. So our concern is that what is the origin of this language or English language used in this area? During the early years of American settlement, the English language is spreading in the south, and a highly distinctive kind of speech emerging in these islands of the West Indies and the southern part of the mainland, spoken by the incoming black population. So when, as we have learned from the history of the origin of American English, there are many black servants were transported. So at that time, many American settlers started to move to the southern part of the globe, especially in these Caribbean islands. And the consequence of importation, African slaves to work on the sugar plantation, a practice stated by Spanish as early as 1517. So Spain, another sea-voyaging country and another mighty country, they started a business that is called sugar plantation. And in such this sugar plantation, lots of slaves were needed. এই সুগার প্ল্যান্টেশনে অনেক মানুষের দরকার হতো কাজ করার জন্য। সেই জায়গাগুলোতে এই ব্ল্যাক সার্ভেন্টস, ব্ল্যাক স্লেভ গুলো বিক্রি করে দেওয়া হতো। In 1517, creates the Hispaniola sugar were being delivered back to the king of Spain. So the Spanish spread their sugar plantation in this area. And the conqueror of Mexico also became an influential sugar producer. And this plantation had an enormous impact on the economy of the New World. To say nothing to introducing African slavery. So the African slave, as we have learned, the black slave, they were taken by the sea voyaging countries, and they were sold to this sugar plantation. Not sold with exchange of a minor things. Let's see. What did the slaves do on sugar plantation? They sowed, tended, and harvested the crop, and then worked to extract the juice from the sugar cane and boil and process the juice in order to turn it into sugar and molasses. And later they might work to distill some of the waste products into rum. So in case of the sugar plantation, they grow sugar, they tend to sugar, and also after getting the juice from the sugar, they will produce is sugar, as well as with some product, they will distill it into one kind of liquor, that is rum. From the early 17th century, ships were from Europe traveled to the West African coast, where they exchanged cheap goods for the black slaves. So here we see a very, what should I say, inhuman activities over there, that they had been the sea voyaging country. They would pick black slave from the African countries and they would exchange this black slave with a exchange of some cheap goods. হয়তো কোনো জায়গায় স্বাভাবিক সামান্য একটা জিনিসের কারণেই একজন ব্ল্যাক স্লেভকে এরকম সুগার প্ল্যান্টেশনে বিক্রি করে দেওয়া হতো। The slaves were shipped in barbarous condition to the Caribbean islands and the American coast. এই যে আফ্রিকান যে স্লেভগুলো, তাদেরকে এই ক্যারিবিয়ান যে আইল্যান্ডস, যে দ্বীপগুলোর আমরা কথা শুনলাম, সেখানে সেখানে সুগার প্ল্যান্টেশনে এবং আমেরিকান কোস্ট এসব জায়গাগুলোতে বিক্রি করা। and they were put in a very barbarous condition where they were in turn exchanged for such commodities as sugar, rum or molasses. So what should be done in the exchange of the black African slave? Only if they would a small can of rum, they would easily exchange a slave to these Caribbean islands, especially the sugar plantation. The ship then returned to England and completing an Atlantic triangle of journey, and the process began again. The first 20 African slaves arrived in Virginia on a Dutch ship in 1619. So that is the condition, that in 1619 only 20 African slaves were handed to this area, Virginia. By the time of the American Revolution, যেখানে 1619 সালে only 20 জন আফ্রিকান স্লেভকে ভার্জিনিয়া অঙ্গপ্রদেশে আমেরিকার বিক্রি করা হয়েছিল, তাদের সংখ্যায় 1776 সালে আমেরিকার রেভলিউশনের সময় দাঁড়ায় 500,000 million. And there were over 4 million by the time slavery was abolished and the end of the US Civil War in 1865. So the black people, the black African slaves, were transported to America as well as the Caribbean islands, where what we are discussing now, for exchange of some small things. And in this way, the black African people were left in the barbarous condition in several portions of Caribbean islands. The American Civil War was a civil war in the United States in 1861 to 1865, fought between the northern state loyal to the Union and the southern state that seceded from the Union for the Confederate State of America. 1861 থেকে 1865 সালে এই 4 বছর আমেরিকার একটা সিভিল ওয়ার হয়। সেটা কি? সেই সিভিল ওয়ার, দ্য নর্দার্ন স্টেট, যে কান্ট্রিগুলো আমরা you see that these are the states, এই নর্দার্ন স্টেটের কিছু অংশ তারা আমেরিকা থেকে আলাদা হতে চেয়েছিল, বিধায় তারা একটা যুদ্ধ করে, সেটাকে বলা হচ্ছে সিভিল স্টেট। So they wanted to establish the Confederate States of America. Even the states left the United States, 11 states left the United States in the following order and formed the Confederate State of America, that is the South Carolina, Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, Texas, Virginia, Arkansas, North Carolina, and Tennessee. So these are the 11 states. They wanted to separate themselves from American ruling power. And combatants, American states and Confederate states. And the military personnel involved Abraham Lincoln. The Confederate States of America, commonly referred as to the Confederate State of the Confederacy, was an unrecognized breakaway states fought against the United States during the American Civil War. So this is the situation that happened in America. And the policy of the slave traders were to bring people of different language background together with the ships to make it different for groups to plot rebellion. So the black African slaves were put in this American province, and also they were put and sold in Caribbean states, and they are put in such a way, they were put in small numbers, and so that they could not make rebellion against যদি তাদেরকে এক জায়গায় অনেক সংখ্যায় ছাড়িয়ে দেওয়া হতো, তখন তারা সবাই সম্মিলিত হয়ে আন্দোলন করতে পারত। এটা যেন করতে না পারে, এজন্য they were put in a barbarous condition and in small numbers in Caribbean states. And the result was brought the several pidgin forms. And for this reason, the African people, they had been speaking in English language. And when they were put in a small numbers, so they had to communicate with their sailors. তাদেরকে তো এই আফ্রিকান স্লেভ গুলোকে কমিউনিকেট করতে হবে তাদের সেলারদের সাথে। তখনই one sort of pidgin language established in these Caribbean islands, and many of whom speak English. And what sort of pidgin language they use? That is the English pidgin language. Once arrived in the Caribbean, this pidgin English continued to act as a means of communications, and between the black population and the new landowners and among the black themselves. So the African black slaves who were shipped and transported to Caribbean islands, especially in the sugar plantation project, they were small in numbers. So they had to communicate in a language. And what is the language? That is English pidgin language. And that pidgin language became the dominant language in Caribbean countries. And that we noticed in the present scenario that most of the people of Caribbean, they speak English as their first language. That the pidgin language, and next time this pidgin language is started to convert it to the Creole language, and that is the English Creole. And at the same time, standard British English was becoming a prestige variety throughout the area because of the emerging political influence of Britain. So that is the history of the origin of Caribbean English. So the Creole forms of French, Spanish, and the Portuguese were also developing in and around the Caribbean. And some of these interacted with both the Creole and the standard varieties of English. So we also notice some other Creole language in this area, but English is more prominent in this area. So as the history suggests that the origin of Caribbean English, as we see that in this Caribbean English, we see a very profitable business established by the Spanish voyager, that is the sugar plantation project. And in this sugar plantation project, many African slaves were shipped and transported to this sugar plantation project. And these people started to talk and communicate with the common lingua franca, and that is the English prison. In this way, English language, English pidgin language became the Creole and the developed language in this area. And that language became the first language of the second generation. However, we see some other existence of the French and the other language in this area, but English is the prominent variety of English language used in this Caribbean country. And that is the origin of English language we noticed in this Caribbean countries. So thank you for